What is up, fight fans? This is the Fights Tonight podcast. I am Luis Romero, and with me is my co-host Travis Polhamus.
What's good?
How you doing, brother?
Doing pretty good, man. Excited for these fights this weekend.
Heck yeah, man. Who we got fighting?
Well, first up, we got Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor.
Ooh, exciting.
Yes, it'll be for all the belts at lightweight.
For all the belts at lightweight. That's exciting.
Yes, if Serrano can win, she'll be the 9th person to hold all 4 belts since the 4-belt era.
Jesus.
Yeah.
How many belts does Katie Taylor have?
She's got all 4. Serrano's been at featherweight and super featherweight and is coming up to lightweight to challenge her. But there's not too much of a size advantage because Serrano's gone up to light welterweight and they start off at bantamweight, and they both look pretty close in size.
Nice. She just signed with Jake Paul, right?
Yes, she did. You're getting a lot more money, a lot more eyes on her for it.
Nice. Yeah. I watched her video on YouTube today, and he was trying to get her 8-figure payday. Is what he was saying.
And she should. Anybody fighting for all 4 belts, being a real undisputed champion, you should get the money. And then Katie Taylor's got all the backing of Eddie Hearn and DAZN and the whole English boxing group behind her. She's Irish, but still going through DAZN and Eddie Hearn.
That's good. I see Jake Paul and Eddie Hearn have a friendly wager of $1 million on their fighters.
Yeah, I can't help but feel like that might be easier for Paul to do. I feel like he's a little more used to spending money and losing it. But
exactly.
Eddie Hearn's definitely got some money too. His fighter's been having a hard time as of late. They get up, they beat everybody, and then they either got to fight a Canelo or a Terrence Crawford or somebody like that. Coming over to the U.S. is always tough for the English fighters,
Right. Does Eddie Hearn, does he own his own gym?
He doesn't. He's more of a promoter. His dad was Barry Hearn, who's a really famous promoter. Had Prince Nassim and had Chris Eubank and so some of the biggest English fighters that were big pay-per-view stars over there. And
wow, that's crazy. I listened to him earlier too, and he was saying that Katie Taylor girl, that when she was a younger girl, she would actually dress as a boy, because over there in Ireland it was boxing as a female. It was banned.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Serrano's from Puerto Rican part of New York, so she's a little more used to being able to fight and stuff like that.
Right.
She's a little more slick. She's a southpaw, more of a brawler, kind of keeps her hands kind of low. Katie Taylor got a gold medal in the Olympics, so she's a little more of a classic Olympic style, a little more technical, not quite as wild.
Right.
They both got good power. They'll be interesting to see the Orthodox versus Southpaw matchup between them.
And you said Amanda Serrano, she's coming up from a lighter weight class, right?
She is, but she's fought as high as 154. So this fight being at 135, Katie Taylor's been comfortable and been at that weight class and beat all the best women there. But Amanda Serrano, as far as being a pro, she's been a pro a little bit longer and has fought other champions at higher weight classes. So
right.
Size-wise, it shouldn't be an issue. It's just kind of how the styles match up, especially in an open stance.
It looks like Amanda Serrano, she has quite a few more fights than Katie Taylor as well.
Pro especially, but that's only because Taylor stayed amateur so long. Taylor's actually 2 years older, I believe. But Katie Taylor did the Olympics in 2012, and then has done a bunch of European and World Championships after that, and always medaled, always done really well.
Yeah, that's impressive. Who do you think is going to win?
I gotta say, Serrano usually, especially being a southpaw and the way she comes at people, I think if she can get inside and kind of get her hooks off, she's got a really nice left overhand. I think she could maybe catch her and make it interesting. But I gotta say, I think Katie Taylor, keeping her hands up a little bit higher and having the amateur experience, I think I could see Taylor taking it, but I think it goes to the scorecards. I don't see a knockout happening in this one unless Serrano can get lucky and catch a good punch. What about you? What are you seeing on this one?
I don't know much about these fighters, but I'm gonna take my chances with Katie Taylor just because she's the underdog.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Try to make a little money on it.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. But yeah, who else is fighting this weekend?
Well, speaking of Southpaw versus Orthodox matchups, we've got Valdez and Shakur Stevenson, and I know you like the underdog.
I do.
So you'll be going with Oscar Valdez.
Yeah, I also like the fact that he's been training with Canelo. That's what I really like.
Yeah, Eddie Reynoso's been training him for his last couple fights. What's funny is that he was the champ at 126, and right when the WBO mandated that he defend his belt against Shakur Stevenson, he went up weight to 130. And a lot of people think that means he was trying to avoid him. I think it was more likely Valdez has an injury or just was having trouble making the weight or something. The thing about it is, even though he's got Reynoso and Canelo in his corner, Shakur Stevenson, his first pro fight, he had Terrence Crawford and Bomac in his corner, and even Andre Ward for a little while. He was one of the only other boxers to retire undefeated aside from Mayweather and Kawasaki.
That Shakur Stevenson, does he still train with Terrence Crawford or?
It was kind of weird. His last fight, he defended. He won his title, I believe, from Jamel Herring, who's that Marine guy. They were both southpaws, and it was actually Terrence Crawford's trainer in the opposite corner because he had been with Jamal Herring lately. So I don't know if that made things kind of weird or what. And like me, Shakur Stevenson's a big fan of Boots. Every one of Boots fights, Shakur Stevenson's there watching it live. After Terrence Crawford's last fight, they asked Shakur Stevenson who he thought would win between Boots and Terrence Crawford, and he just said, "Man, don't ask me that."
Man, it looks like there's quite a bit of an age difference between Oscar Valdez and Shakur Stevenson.
Yeah, Shakur Stevenson got right out of the Olympics and came and went pro and has kind of been working his way up quick, not trying to waste any time, whereas Valdez made his pro debut at least 5 years before and had some good wins and some good finishes and stuff. He's kind of like Lomachenko, where he's not the most scary knockout puncher, but he does so well in combinations that he still gets a lot of knockouts, especially with his left hook. His left hook in his last fight, he fought Burchelt, who was WBC champ at 130, and Burchelt's a real scary kind of come and get you type guy, and everybody, including Shakur Stevenson, was there, had Burchelt winning and was planning on fighting Burchelt after. And Burchelt came out, played it kind of cautious and stuff, and Valdez started doing his 4 or 5 hit combos with the left hook at the end and ended up knocking out Burchelt pretty bad, kind of face planted at the end, which was a pretty big upset to everybody. So at least him being the underdog isn't anything new. He's definitely been in that situation before and should have a lot more pro experience, especially being the only Mexican to do compete in 2 different Olympic games.
Oh wow, he competed in the Olympics too, huh?
Yeah. I don't recall whether he medaled or not, but I believe he did pretty good in each. Whereas Shakur Stevenson only did 1 Olympic Games, but was the silver medalist in it.
And that was at the Rio de Janeiro one in 2016.
I believe so, yeah. And he's kind of, without the Philly shell, he's kind of Mayweather-ish, where he's not looking to get hit a lot. He uses the long guard a lot, kind of like you and Sparring.
Right.
And he's really good at getting his punches in, and he plays it kind of cautious in the early rounds, but then once he starts opening up, kind of like Crawford, he really puts some heavy shots on people. And the funny thing is, Valdez, being orthodox, knocks a lot of people out, and the punch he always seems to hurt people with is his left hook.
Right.
Stevenson, even though he's got a good overhand left, he always hurts people with his lead right hook. And I've seen a couple different times that Shakur Stevenson has knocked out a right-handed guy. He throws his left hook, and Shakur Stevenson kind of comes inside it with his lead right hook. And so it's definitely going to be a battle of lead hooks. Both their lead hands are going to be real close, being southpaw versus orthodox, and should be interesting. I'd like to say I could see, just with the experience they have, it going late, but I could see there definitely being a knockout in this one. Valdez tends to come out and start kind of nuts and kind of really come at people. And Stevenson's one of those guys that he doesn't come right out the gate and try to knock you out.
Slow starter.
But he will look for big counters. So if you are like really swinging wide and really coming at him,
he'll capitalize on that.
It's a good chance of him catching you with something. And the thing is, Valdez has a good left hook, but like even in his last fight against Burchelt, he's usually catching another right-handed fighter with it. Whereas the main advantage of being a southpaw is that you go against right-handed fighters a lot more often than right-handed fighters go against southpaws.
Right.
So even if you both have really good lead hooks, the chances are 70% of Valdez's fights, he's going against another right-hander. Whereas Stevenson, most of his sparring rounds, most of his fights are always going to be against a right-handed guy. So he's more used to that footing position. He's more used to trying to slip his lead hook inside the other guys. Mm-hmm. And he also, even though Valdez trains hard, works with some good guys, you can tell by Shakur being young and being in the crowd for Boots' fights and really being interested in other fighters that are like at the same level and even maybe a couple steps behind of him, that he's really studying up-and-coming guys and really trying to add things to his game and constantly getting good rounds with Terrence Crawford, whereas Canelo and Valdez are so different in weight that if they can spar together, they're going to have to take it kind of light.
It's
and
not going to be
kinda
100%. Yeah.
Whereas Crawford and Shakur Stevenson are a lot closer in weight, so like they get a lot more rounds. And I even saw an Instagram post where Terrence Crawford was helping Shakur Stevenson, like giving him sparring rounds to get ready for this fight. And Terrence isn't known for his lead left hook and doesn't have a typical Mexican style the way Valdez does, but sparring somebody like Terrence Crawford, it's hard to think you're going to run into anybody in the ring that's going to be any trickier than he is.
Right. Yeah. What's the weight difference between Terrence Crawford and...
Terrence Crawford's, he is a 147 pounder. The thing is that he's a small 147, whereas Spence and Jaron Ennis are big 147s, because Terrence Crawford started off at 135, won all the belts at 140, and now is just now kind of starting to fill out into a 147 pounder. And Shakur Stevenson is young, just came up to 130. So there's, before weight cuts, probably only a 15-pound difference between them. Whereas Valdez and Canelo, it's more like 30, 40 pounds between them. So
right.
That makes a big difference. Boxers don't, unlike us in kickboxing and jiu-jitsu and stuff, they're not constantly going with guys that got huge weight advantage on them. A guy like Valdez can't have a guy like Canelo really turning it up on him in sparring, especially somebody at Canelo's level. It's going to be a real problem.
Right.
Whereas Crawford, not only that, Valdez has been with Eddie Reynoso and Canelo and them for at least a couple camps that I know of. But I mean, Shakur Stevenson literally had Andre Ward and Terrence Crawford in his corner for his first pro fight. So like they've been with him the whole time. Mayweather offered to sign him. He turned it down because he didn't like the way Mayweather was going about it. And
right, but you said he fights like Mayweather, does the Philly shell.
Kind of. It's not so much the Philly shell. It's just when Mayweather isn't standing there and looking to counter you in the Philly shell, the way that he goes about hitting you with different punches in different areas, but you never really see Mayweather get wild. He's always like, when Mayweather does get a knockout, it's usually a counter, or it's usually somebody he's already got tired or hurt, and then he's walking him down.
Okay.
Shakur Stevenson's kind of like that, where he's going to play it safe. He's going to use his footwork and his distance and his straights. He really likes that long guard. Whereas Valdez is going to come out a little more wild than you'd expect a guy who's competed at multiple Olympic Games.
With Oscar coming out like that, how's his gas tank?
Valdez is got it, like most Mexican boxers, he works really hard. He's got a really good gas tank. He's used to going out there and putting hard 4, 5, 6 punch combinations pretty much the whole time. And usually, if you can't really put something on him to make him stay back, 5 or 6 rounds, you can't keep having somebody come at you like that, because it'll wear you out. And he's one of those guys, like I say, like middle rounds, you'll notice he'll eventually catch somebody with a left hook and they'll kind of wobble a little bit. And then he's not like the most dangerous finisher in the sense of like Crawford or something where they hurt you once and within 30 seconds the fight's over. But he's definitely a guy that like he's going to keep coming. You know what I mean? And you can. It should be a real interesting fight. Their styles are different enough and their stances are different enough to where I wouldn't feel too comfortable putting too much money on it. I mean, obviously Shakur Stevenson's the favorite and is the young up-and-comer, and Valdez, even though he's a champion at the weight class too and been a multiple weight class champion, I think he's kind of getting towards the tail end of things, where Shakur's a lot younger in his career, and I think his ultimate goal is to win the belts at 130 and go up to 135 and get some of the big matchups with Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis,
right,
Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, kind of who they call like the new 4 princes of boxing. Yep. I think that's what he's looking for.
Okay.
And because he doesn't really train with any of those guys, I think that's also why he didn't sign with Mayweather, because you could tell Mayweather was already pushing Tank, and Tank was at 130 and then 135, and that's where he's at now. And so, whereas Valdez is, I think he's kind of sized out. He could go up to 135 and make some things interesting, but Shakur's so young, he'll fill out more to where he could really have some exciting matchups.
Has he been tested before in any of his previous fights?
See, that's the thing, is that where Valdez has had some tough fights and been a pro for a long time and fought some scary guys like Burchell, I think this is it should be Valdez's toughest fight, but it's not as big of a step up as it is for Shakur Stevenson. All of his performances have been really impressive, but aside from his last fight against Jamel Herring, there was nobody there that could really test him. And him and Jamel Herring had both been in Terrence Crawford's gym for a while, so he had kind of known how to go about fighting him in sparring, and it was good to see that he could handle another southpaw as a southpaw. But I think this is a big step up for him. I think he'll do good in it, but I think it's more of a jumping competition for him than it is for Valdez.
Nice. And this is supposed to be on ESPN.
Yes. The Taylor Serrano fight's a DAZN fight, whereas this one will be ESPN, and if you're in England, it'll be on Sky Sports.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sky Sports, never heard of it.
Sky Sports is really good. If you ever go on YouTube, they've got some of the best boxing specials, and they really do so well in their documentaries and like their interviews and stuff with their boxers, because like Teddy Atlas always jokes about, they don't have football and the NBA and all these different things over there, so they make such a bigger deal of their boxers, where there's boxers that most American fans have never heard of, but in England they're like a big deal.
Right.
Like over here, Dillian White, who was Tyson Fury's last opponent, most people were like, who's he fighting? Whereas everybody in England knows Dillian White from his fights with Anthony Joshua, and they really back their guys in a way I wish we would do over here in America. We just have too many other big sports,
Exactly.
NFL and NBA and all this stuff that takes up a lot of that attention.
Yeah, it seems like they all end on the same day too. Like we have 3 fights going on this weekend.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is there's also the UFC card, which, especially if you're a striking fan, is going to split some people up, because not everybody knows who Shakur Stevenson and Valdez are, and
Which they should.
They definitely should, and most of them don't know who Katie Taylor and Serrano is. If they do, it's probably because of the Jake Paul influence and stuff like that. But if you are a striking fan, you'll like the main event of the UFC card, which is Rob Font versus Chito Vera.
Chito Vera.
Yeah, Chito Vera, known for being the guy who beat Sean O'Malley, who still refuses to accept that he lost.
Oh, he got no losses,
Yeah,
Travis.
Yeah, and then Chito Vera did lose to Jose Aldo after that, but he put up a good performance, and then he came back, fought Frankie Edgar, and knocked him out with that cool front kick.
Right.
Which shown to be
that was nasty.
Shown to be a weakness for poor Frankie. His stuff coming up the middle. Ortega got him with an uppercut. Corey Sandhagen got him with that nasty flying knee, and now Chito Vera got him with that front kick. In fact, the Korean Zombie also got him with an uppercut too, I think. It was like a right uppercut, left hook, right hook, left hook. And kind of caught him. Real cool combo that he caught him with.
Right.
The thing is about Rob Font is he beat Cody Garbrandt in his last one, but had a bit of a length and size advantage, which is why Garbrandt was toying around with the idea of going down to 125. And so Rob Font's a guy like me, really likes his jab and his straight right hand. And so if he can put that on Chito, I think he'll do good. Thing is Rob Font can kind of slow down a little bit in the later rounds. And Chito Vera has got a Canelo thing where, like, he's never super impressive in that first round.
Right.
But then the second round, the third round, Chito Vera always starts coming on, and that's when he got his finish over Frankie. He was getting chewed up by O'Malley a little bit until he caught that calf kick and then hit him with the ground and pound.
Yep.
And the other thing about Chito Vera is he's really good in the clinch, too. So I feel like if Font wants to do well, he's really going to have to keep it at range and really have to put some power into those straight punches and really make Chito think and get a good lead early, because Chito's only going to get better as the fight goes on.
How is Rob Font's grappling?
Rob Font's grappling, he's gotten a couple submissions. I think him and Chito are probably close to the same level on that. Rob Font trains with Calvin Cater and those guys from Boston, who are more known for their striking than their grappling. And then Chito Vera has been training with Jason Perillo, who trained Bisping, used to train BJ Penn. The other guy he's probably most well known for training right now is Sean Strickland. So he's also, he used to be
Sean Strickland, I hate that guy.
He used to be a boxer himself. So Perillo's gym, he has grapplers come in, obviously, but Perillo's gym's also known, like Bisping, you look at his wins, they're mainly striking wins. BJ Penn was already a black belt when he started working with Jason Perillo, so it should stay a striking battle, but I think they're both good enough to where if they hurt the other guy and the guy shoots on him, they could pick up kind of a sloppy guillotine or something like that. But
it looks like Rob Font, he's the favorite in this fight.
Yeah, that kind of surprises me a little bit. He's looked better in his last couple, but I can't help but feel like Chito Vera has been taking the tougher fights. Rob Font, he did beat Marlon Vera instead of Chito Vera, but Marlon Vera had been knocked out a couple times recently. And The other thing is he also fought Cody Garbrandt, who's been knocked out a lot recently. So he looks good having these knockouts, but he fought guys that are getting knocked out a bunch, whereas Chito Vera's record's a little more hit and miss, but he's fighting Sean O'Malley and beat him, who nobody was really signing up to fight. He fought Jose Aldo, who nobody's really signing up to fight.
Right.
Then he fought Frankie Edgar, which was a little bit easier of a matchup for him, but still a high-ranked former champion.
Right.
And I take that back. I'm thinking of Marlon Moraes. Marlon Moraes is the guy that Rob Font knocked out. That's what I get for talking about two different guys named Marlon.
A lot of fighters out there.
It's amazing that the only two fighters you can think of named Marlon are in the same weight class.
Yeah.
So that was my bad on that. It was Marlon Moraes that Rob Font knocked out, just like he beat Cody Garbrandt. But both those guys, their last couple of fights, all ended by knockout, and especially Marlon Moraes was coming back from things a little bit too early.
Okay.
I think. Whereas
did he get hurt or?
He just kept getting knocked out, and then you'd see him again on a fight card in 2 months. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you should be taking 3 months off.
Right.
And if you're fighting again in 3 months, he went back to training, and at least been training for 6 to 8 weeks before that. Yeah. And when you get knocked out the way he was getting knocked, he got knocked out bad with that spinning hook kick by Corey Sandhagen, and then he got knocked out by somebody else too. And so when you're the third guy, when you get like a guy's third knockout in a row on his record, how much of that is you being a knockout artist, and how much of that is like this guy needs to maybe take a breather for a minute?
Yep.
Kind of a similar thing like with Frankie Edgar, where Marlon Vera did knock out Sean O'Malley, even though he doesn't want to admit it. When he hit him with those ground and pound shots, you could see his arms go limp for a second. He was definitely out. And then even in that Jose Aldo fight, he was doing good. Jose Aldo was just a little too experienced, a little too crafty for him.
Yeah, he's one of the greats in my opinion.
Exactly, and his last fight, he beat Frankie Edgar, who's another guy who's kind of had a hard road lately and been getting finished a lot. I think that might have been Frankie's first fight back after the flying knee knockout by Corey Sandhagen. So both of them in their last fight, kind of knocked a guy out that maybe wasn't quite ready to come back.
Yeah.
I think Chito Vera recently's probably had this stiffer competition, but Font's looked more impressive recently, so kind of a toss-up. That's impressive that Font is the favorite. I wonder if that's because of those knockouts, because I think Chito Vera might be the one underdog this weekend that I think might be worth putting some money on.
So that's who we're betting on, huh?
I think so, because I've never seen Chito Vera outclassed or not look good. A lot of his fights kind of just end up being close because he kind of takes the first round off. I don't know if it takes him a while to get into it, or he feels like he wants to save his energy until the second round when the other guy's kind of already breathing a little bit.
Right.
But Chito Vera's got a lot of second and third round finishes. I think that O'Malley finish is maybe the quickest one that I've seen with him. But the other thing is he's
was that second round?
I think it was. I'm not 100% sure, but he's one of those guys that, he just never looks that impressive in the first round, but then he really puts it on people at the end, whereas Rob Font, or Fob Ront, as a bunch of people have been messing his name up in their call-outs, and it's kind of become a joke, he comes out early with heavy straights and right hands, which I can certainly appreciate.
Right.
But after a while, if Chito Vera is still around for that second and third round, I feel like he should have a pretty good read on it. The other thing is, Chito Vera switches stances pretty well and has a good clinch, which you don't necessarily want to switch southpaw when a guy's got a really nasty right hand like Rob Font does, just like his teammate Calvin Kattar, but it could kind of mix things up a little bit, whereas Rob Font kind of really keeps it right-handed, and it's mainly those straights. He'll throw an uppercut, he'll throw a knee or a kick, but It's really that's what you got to look out for. So my pick on that one personally would be Chito Vera, but and they both have good power, and I could see it being a knockout, but I see maybe a split decision on that one. It being 5 rounds makes me interested in the fact that Chito Vera comes on strong so late, and I don't know that I've seen him go 5 rounds.
Do you know anyone else on the main card for that fight?
You know what? Let me take a quick peek at it.
All right.
Let's see what we got here. Yeah, Arlovsky's fighting Jake Collier, which is another one of them setting up a young guy to beat Arlovsky, and somehow Arlovsky keeps winning, even though he was heavyweight champ before I started watching 10 years ago. Andre Feely, who's one of the better kickboxers out of Team Alpha Male, is fighting Joe Anderson Brito, who I can't say I know. Gordon and Grant Dawson, two pretty well-rounded lightweights. That should be a decent one. Tristan Connolly, he's got some interesting stuff he does. He's fighting Darren Elkins, the Damage, who's known for just being able to take an absolute beating. And then when you gas yourself out beating him up, he'll somehow find a way to win.
Respectable.
And then Christoph Jocko, who's kind of a so-so middleweight, in my opinion, is fighting Gerald Mearshart, who has been doing not bad coming back off that really quick knockout against Kamzat that he suffered. And then on the prelims, I'm not seeing anything that jumps out to me aside from Chase Sherman fighting Alexander Romanov, who's a Russian heavyweight I've heard a lot of good things about. He's undefeated. And Chase Sherman's kind of one of those win one, lose one type guys, so I think that could be a showcase fight for Romanov, probably why he's the main fight on the prelims.
Right.
But a lot of times, as you know, it's some of the guys you haven't heard of that are just coming into the UFC that are some of the more exciting ones, especially with there being a couple flyweight fights. Usually those guys tend to be a bit more well-rounded. And so we'll see what happens, but it should be a good night of fights. It's just for all the true fight fans, it's going to be really tough finding a way to switch back and forth between, especially if you want to catch the women's boxing match too. Luckily, ESPN and DAZN seem to have kind of figured out to try to space yourself around the UFC rather than go at exactly the same time.
That's smart.
So you might miss some boxing prelims, but you should be able to catch one main event and then kind of go right into the other.
Hell yeah. Now, Canelo, he's fighting next week, right, against Bivol.
Dimitri Bivol,
Yeah,
which I gotta say I'm kind of impressed that he's doing. Better Biev at 175 would be the scariest fight for him, but Canelo says he plans on getting all the belts, so there's no reason to take the scariest guy on first. Bivol is undefeated and is a pretty scary boxer. The thing about him is, for a big guy, he's not Canelo, for lack of a better way of putting it. He's pretty technical and is a pretty good boxer, which could definitely give Canelo problems if you see the times Canelo's either lost, like to Mayweather, or lost a lot of rounds, like to Amir Khan, and Khan was a lot quicker. But it tends to be a guy who can box and move really well and just kind of jab Canelo up. You've got to have a way to either move or keep him off you with straights. Because if he starts getting in, throwing those hooks and those body shots, you're going to have a problem. The other thing, Canelo probably naturally now, with how much muscle he's put on, probably is best suited to be at 168, but even those guys have a hell of a reach and size advantage on him. So Bivol's going to be quite a bit bigger. Canelo's power seems to translate pretty well, regardless of who he's hitting. The thing is, Bivol belongs at this weight class and has been here for a long time, whereas Canelo's only fought once at this weight class, and it was against Kovalev, who is definitely on the tail end of his career and isn't quite in his prime the way that Canelo is. The thing that I think makes Canelo win this fight is, aside from Bivol not being able to knock him out, and you have to get a decision against the biggest draw in boxing, the biggest Mexican boxer in a place where he's the favorite on Cinco de Mayo weekend, which is gonna be, you're gonna have to kill him.
That is going to be
otherwise
huge fight.
You're not gonna get the decision. They're even joking on one other show I heard where they were like, well, what if Bivol drops him every round? And they're like, well, they'll call it a disqualification or something like that,
Right.
To get a decision against Canelo, you're gonna have to really earn it. And I just don't see Bivol knocking Canelo out. I see it being a competitive fight, might even go the distance, but I just think either Canelo's able to break him down, or most likely Bivol's not impressive enough to take a close split from him. But that's probably the one I'm looking forward to the most, aside from this Stevenson Valdez matchup.
And he used to fight in the Olympics too, Dimitri Bivol, right?
He did, and did well. He, if I'm not mistaken, he's part Asian. I want to say he's a Kazakh fighter, and his dad is Russian, and his mom was Korean or something like that. I'm sure I'm off on the nationalities there, but he's kind of an interesting case in himself. The thing I think works against him is that he's had a couple impressive fights against guys that could hold their own, but this will be Canelo's 15th fight against an undefeated world champion in his prime. The difference is with that type of stage and that type of skill level, this is Bivol's first time ever fighting somebody on the level of Canelo Alvarez. Whereas this is Canelo Alvarez, he's in double digits of fighting guys. He's fought guys that were better boxers, had bigger names, were more experienced. As far as at 175, this will be a test as far as a guy at that size that's not quite on the tail end of their career like Kovalev was.
Right.
But Bivol also doesn't have the rep that Kovalev does. But how he does against Bivol will be a good sign for how he does against Beterbiev, who's a little bit more scary of a guy at 175. I think if there was somebody at light heavyweight at 175 that could really hurt Canelo and really get some respect from him so that he didn't feel like he could walk in and just throw those hooks, I think it's Beterbiev. And so how he does against Bivol will really, if he has a hard time with Bivol, that makes me think Beterbiev will really be a good fight. Whereas if he really handles Bivol, if I was his team, I'd go ahead and set up the Beterbiev fight. And if Canelo wins all the belts at 175 the way he did at 168 after starting at 154, he's definitely the greatest Mexican boxer of all time, at least by accomplishments, if nothing else. And maybe he's got to start getting talked about being one of the best boxers ever, because to fight that many different styles.
Right.
His only loss is against Mayweather, where they made him cut extra weight from super welterweight down to 152. It should have been 154. And Canelo, even though he had a lot of fights, he was 22 or 23 or something, and Mayweather was at the tail end of his prime, so he was as slick and as athletic as he was probably ever going to be. Canelo definitely, for all the things I haven't liked and times I thought he waited too long to fight Triple G and stuff, but if he wins all the belts at 175, there's not going to be much you could say after that. I mean, he was even toying with the idea of going to cruiserweight, up at 190, which it's really tough to go up weight like that when you start where he did. It's a little easier when you start like Pacquiao and you're starting at minimum weight or 110 and you only go up to 150, but going the size difference Canelo deals with. Plus, he's got that Tyson short, stocky build, so he's really gonna deal with guys that got super long arms compared to him. Mm-hmm. His only saving grace is not only his skill, but the fact that he hits so hard that his power really translates.
Right. Yeah. Hard enough to break an eye socket.
What do you think on this Bivol-Canelo matchup?
Ooh, obviously Canelo. I gotta support my Mexican brother, Travis.
Of course.
My Mexican brother.
And I didn't get a chance to ask you, who are you going with in the UFC main event? Are you going to take
Rob Font or
Chito Vera?
Chito Vera. Probably go with Chito Vera.
Yeah, you're just going to pick the underdog.
I'm just going to pick the underdog.
Pick your underdog every single fight. Well, at least if Lewis is right, he will make a lot of money.
I haven't been wrong yet, Travis.
He's certainly been making more money on the betting than me. He's also a little bit braver, too, so that should, like they say, scared money don't make no money. So Lewis does deserve some credit for that, if nothing else.
Right. That's about it for fights coming up and this weekend, right?
Yeah, and we'll hopefully be able to come back and do a better, more in-depth episode for the Canelo versus Bivol fight and whatever other fights are going on this weekend. But just the UFC card and these two separate boxing cards are enough to really satiate any fight fan that's looking to see a lot of different matchups and even some open stance matchups and some stuff that should be really interesting both in boxing and MMA.
And eventually in our future podcast, we're going to have some live commentary when these fights do come on. We'll have some live breakdowns. Give our thoughts then too.
That'll be real interesting. Real interesting.
Well, thank you, fight fans, for joining me. And Travis, thank you for being my co-host.
No problem, brother. Happy to do it.
All right.